Hey, I'm Erik Wait. Thanks for joining me for another episode. But before we get into the whiskey, let's take a tour around Treaty Oak Distillery. Welcome to another Erik Wait Whiskey Study. I'm currently celebrating Texas Whiskey Month. I flew down to Texas in April 2019, so in May I have been celebrating Texas Whiskey Month and sharing with you whiskeys that I brought back from my trip to Texas. In this video, I'm going to be reviewing a bottle that I picked up from Treaty Oak Distillery. This is the Ghost Hill Texas Bourbon whiskey. You may notice it has a slight sort of bluish label on the bottom. They have several different offerings, some that they made, some that they sourced. So they are open about their production, and they have several different labels, and they have a little handout you can actually pick up at the distillery. Those with sort of a pinkish reddish label, they call red-handed, and those are actually sourced, the juice from Davis Valley Distillery. Those with a white label come from Shenley Distillery, and then those with the blue actually come from their own distillery. Now, why do they have whiskeys from other distilleries? Well, there are several different models or approaches you can have when you are a new startup distillery. And we've seen several of these in Texas. Garrison Brothers, they apparently had enough holdings or enough money saved up, and then they sold t-shirts while they were waiting for their bourbon to age before release. So they opened up and they had no income for a while until their bourbon was ready to be released. That's the most expensive route. That's the most difficult route, and the only way typically you do that is if you already have some money from another source. What's common is someone who made money perhaps in another business and decided, hey, I'm going to open up a winery or I'm going to open up a distillery. They're actually not going into whiskey business or wine business. This is very, very, very common, particularly here in California, to start off with making money rather than made money doing something else. And so they can sort of survive on their savings while they're waiting for their wine or their whiskey to be ready for sale. Another model is to produce a white spirit, perhaps a vodka or a gin, which you can turn right around, sell, have some income while you're waiting for your brown spirit, your whiskey, to mature and be ready to age. That has that advantage of having your own spirit ready to sell. However, the problem is when you do that, you are essentially making a name for yourself, not as a whiskey producer, but as a vodka and gin producer. So you're sort of having those associations with vodka and gin. And if you want to be distinctly known as a whiskey producer, then you sort of muddled your branding there. Another way to do it is you're only going to be known as a whiskey producer. However, at the beginning, what you're going to do is you're going to source spirit, perhaps MGP, whiskeys from somewhere else, sell them, and then while you're waiting for your own whiskey to be ready. What I like about Treaty Oak Distillery is they are very, very open right on the label as to what it is you are getting. The Crowded Barrel did something very similar to that. And they also sourced, they got from NGP while they're waiting for their own bourbon to be ready. Alrighty, so the notes on this whiskey, most of which you can also find right on the side of the label. I really, really like that. So the notes I'm going to share with you, actually, for the most part, are right here on the side of the bottle. Treaty Oak Distilling Ghost Hill Texas Bourbon Whiskey. The bourbon is named after their 28-acre ranch home in Dripping Springs, Texas. Ghost Hill Bourbon is made with local heirloom grains from Barton Springs Mill.
The mash bill consists of 57% Texas Yellow No. 1 corn, 32% wheat, and 11% barley. It's made with limestone filtered water from Dripping Springs, Texas. It is a genuine grain-to-glass bourbon. It is mashed, fermented, distilled, barreled, aged 2 years in first-use American White Oak Char No. 3 barrels, and bottled on site at Treaty Oak Distillery. It is bottled at 47.5% alcohol by volume, or 95 proof.
Alrighty, let's get into it. So I've tried this several times, had it in different ways. I've had it neat, I've had it with a little bit of water, I've had it on ice, had it with a chilled glass, got it down a little bit below the shoulder, and that's what I think is sort of the sweet spot for really getting to understand a whiskey, and trying it different ways so that when I tell you about the whiskey, I've really given it a fair shake. It is a little youthful on the nose. Now, some whiskeys or bourbons can be so youthful that they're too green and you can kind of tell they're really not ready. This is not the case with this one. I do get a little bit of sort of a youthful appleness, a youthful grain, a youthful corn, but it still has a classic bourbon note. Caramels, vanilla, cinnamon, light wood spices, nutmeg, cardamom. All right, on the palate. One more. Not only do I want to not judge a whiskey from a neck pour, I don't judge from the first sip. The whiskey is silky, somewhat creamy, glides across the palate, and on the palate, the nose is confirmed. It is still youthful in character. Light corn, apple, green apple, cinnamon, a little bit of a sort of an apple pie note. But imagine an apple pie that maybe needed another minute in the oven. That's probably the best way I would describe it. Slightly under-baked apple pie. Cinnamon, nutmeg, caramels. So, some of the whiskeys I had from Texas really have this sort of intensity of the Texas climate. You can tell they really were full, pedal to the metal in extraction from the oak, and really aging quickly from the heat. This is a youthful whiskey, but it doesn't have or doesn't display that same sort of intensity. This seems like sort of, I would say, an average bourbon that doesn't scream Texas. I would never necessarily pick up anything out of this that tells me it's from Texas. It doesn't have the sort of climatic features of, say, the Garrison Brothers Distillery. It doesn't have that sort of intensity of Garrison Brothers Distillery, and I haven't done them yet, or of Iron Root Distillery. We'll be getting into those shortly, or even that of the Crowded Barrel. It's a good bourbon. It's sort of a classic bourbon, but for me, it doesn't display anything distinctly reflective of Texas. What would I give it as a score? I'm going to give this a solid 87 points. I like it more, I would say, on ice. When I put on ice, drop the temperature a little bit, it becomes a little bit sweeter, and the caramels and vanilla seem to really pop on it. Alrighty, that's it for this review. If you subscribe to this channel, I want to thank you very much. If you haven't yet subscribed, but you like watching my videos, I would greatly appreciate it if you would subscribe, give it a thumbs up, share with your friends on Facebook, Twitter, and other social networking channels. And if you ever go down to Texas, I would actually recommend you check out Treaty Oak Distillery. Absolutely a beautiful property. All right, until next time, cheers.
Hey, if you like my review, be sure to check out these other whiskey videos.